I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program today. Good morning to everybody out there listening. Thank you so much for being with us. Boy, we got a great show for you today. I'm telling you what, a lot of news to get to. Obviously, we have the news of what President Trump has been up to in Hanoi, Vietnam. In the context of what's also going on here, what went on yesterday, a circus, a clown show in Washington, D.C., just extremely frustrating, if you ask me. Just because, even President Trump said, other people said, pundits said, you could have waited a few days to do this. Things were going on in Vietnam, very important. Now, the news is, and I'm sure you've already heard, that there is no deal. There is no deal with North Korea. President Trump walking away. And, of course, that's the number one point of his book, The Art of the Deal. You got to know when to walk away, or you got to be willing to walk away at any point. And apparently, from what I can tell, I know the left's going to be the left, and they're going to do everything they can to make this look bad for the president. But from what I can tell, this was a smart decision to walk away from the deal. Kim Jong-un wants the sanctions lifted. And President Trump wants to lift the sanctions, but he wants to do it for a complete denuclearization deal, not just one 4-mile-long facility that is a big facility. If you were listening to the press conference this morning, President Trump was saying that North Korea was surprised to know that the United States knew so much about some of the other capabilities of the North Koreans, some of the other locations. Uranium enrichment comes to mind. And President Trump wants those things on the table as well. He also wants a complete accounting of the capabilities, a declaration from North Korea saying this is what we got. And they're not ready to do that yet. However, they still left on good terms. They shook each other's hands, according to reports, and they left on good terms. I also was watching some coverage of Fox. Ed Henry, who is in Vietnam, was saying that this summit is so much different from the one that happened in Singapore. Apparently, the one in Singapore, they were afraid to eat each other's food because they were afraid of it being poisoned. That's not the case. This time, the United States bringing some good American steak to a dinner. North Koreans bringing a bunch of shrimp. And apparently, there was a lot more cross-pollination, if you will. A lot more trust has developed. And I could tell last night, right before I was about to go to bed, I was watching the press conference between Kim Jong-un and President Trump, and I could tell there was something off when President Trump said, I'm not worried about the timing. I'm not worried about the speed. I want a good deal. I'd rather have a good deal and wait than a bad deal just to sign something. Of course, everyone was anticipating the end of the Korean War, some 60-some-odd year conflict between the North and the South. People were talking about potential down the road for the reunification of the Korean Peninsula, the economic powerhouse that would develop as a part of that. And I think that's stuff that's still a possibility in the future, but it wasn't meant to be at this point in time. In the meantime, brace yourselves, conservatives, brace yourselves, rational-minded people in the middle. You're going to continue to see people completely pile on a president who actually is doing and is trying to do very, very big things, is trying to, the left used to want peace. They used to think peace was a good thing, and now they want proxy wars with Russia, and they want to blame Russia for everything, and it's just frustrating, very frustrating. Hey, folks, the telephone number today is 870-275-9799. If you would like to text us, you feel free to do that. Coming up in the next hour at 7:05, we'll be talking with State Representative Julie Mayberry. Now, the reason we're talking to her is because she has filed a bill that is competing with the governor's highway plan that has tax increases. Her bill is an attempt to fund our roads without increasing taxes. Now, I'm sure she'll share this with us at 7:05, but the bottom line is the governor's bill has already passed the House committee, and it's scheduled to be heard on the House floor this afternoon. If that bill passes, Julie Mayberry's bill likely won't even get heard in the House committee. And so State Representative Julie Mayberry will be on the program at 7:05 to discuss this. And I want to commend her for coming up with ideas that don't raise our taxes. Then we have State Representative Lanny Fight going to be on the program coming up at 7:33. We want to talk about his bill, HB 1321, that would increase the homestead property tax credit by $25. That's certainly something positive to highlight because it means more money in your pocket. So all that on the program. It was an emotional day for some yesterday in the 92nd General Assembly, for some, and it has to do with the Confederate flag. The Arkansas Times write-up is very typical, one that you would expect. I saw one that said the South has risen again. This is over State Representative Charles Blake's bill that would rename or redesignate the star, the lone star in the Arkansas flag, not the grouping of three, but the one that's by itself in the center of the flag, that stands for the Confederacy. It stands for the time when Arkansas was a member of another government, the Confederate States of America. This upsets some because of the history of slavery. They look at the flag. Most people don't even know what that star stands for. But I guess now more and more people do. And this upsets people because they think of slavery and you know the scars of the country. So there is a movement about, now this bill was defeated. This was defeated. I mean, it went down in flames, actually. You need to have 11 affirmative votes. There was a roll call. You got to have 11 yes votes to get it out of committee. And there wasn't, I think, how many was? Let me see. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yes votes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yes votes to change the star, and instead make that lone star stand for what State Representative Charles Blake said were the first Arkansans, Indian tribes or Native American tribes, which that's not true. That those, in my opinion, those are not the first Arkansans. The first Arkansans were the people who were in the state when it became a state, and Arkansas became a state in the Union in 1836. Like those were the first Arkansans. Native Americans were not the first Arkansans. Okay, I mean, I know the name is an Indian name, but still, we're talking about a sovereign government here. Okay, so they weren't the first Arkansans, and ever since then, the stars on the flag, they represent the countries that Arkansas have been a part of. We've been a part of Spanish rule, of French rule, of the United States rule, and Confederate rule, and now back to the United States. If we want to start, and this people were talking about, this is not about rewriting history. No, it's about erasing it. Let me say that very clearly. It's about erasing history, not rewriting it. It's about erasing it. It's about trying to, get rid of things that listen. To me, it's right in line with removing statues to try to end disagreements. If you change that star, you're not going to end disagreements. It's just like separating Martin Luther King and Robert E. Lee being celebrated on the same day. It doesn't end disagreements. It doesn't do anything. We have a generation of people who can recognize injustice, but they don't know how to reconcile injustice. They don't understand, and it's very frustrating to me because we have a lot of people that don't understand that you have things that happen in the past that are absolutely morally deplorable by our standards today. But back then, it was wrong, but society did not. We fought a war over it, but leading up to it, society didn't think it was wrong. And isn't that crazy today? I actually think that's how we're going to look at abortion one day. We're not going to imagine how people could be so cold when it comes to the issue of human life, just like we can't imagine enslaving an entire race of people because they were black. Now, you did have descendants of people who fought in the Confederacy that said, "I want the star to stay like it is." State Representative Charles Blake says that he will attempt to bring this bill back, but the Gazette writes that the flag bill flops in committee. John Moritz, redesignating Confederate star to honor tribes, fails 8-5. A star in a prominent place on the state flag, denoting Arkansas's place in the Confederate States of America, doesn't need to be assigned a new meeting, according to the committee. It's House Bill 1487. It needed 11. It says it needed 10 votes. It actually needed 11 votes. I read that last night. Thought they'd correct it. They haven't. Republicans on the committee, joined by a contingent of men who identify themselves as descendants of the Confederate veterans, questioned the motivations of the bill's sponsor. They described the bill as part of a slippery slope to removing other objects regarding the Confederacy across the state. You know, there's Civil War monuments on the Capitol grounds. Civil War monuments on the Capitol grounds. Yeah, this is about not understanding that people in history, human beings, are capable in all levels of history of doing really terrible things. Human beings are also capable of doing good things. The telephone number 870-275-9799. Let's go to the audio tape, shall we? This is State Representative Charles Blake from yesterday in the House committee. And this is what he said about why the state needs to rename. He says the context of the star on the flag has to do with the Ku Klux Klan more than it does the Confederacy. Let's listen.
Get started. If there's anyone,
the audio tape, shall we? This is state.
If there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak for or against this bill, make sure that you've signed up on the sign-up sheet. I believe it's located right outside the door. I'll also remind you when we get to that point in the meeting. So, Representative Blake, you are recognized to present House Bill 1487.
Thank you, Chairman Tosh. You're so far away. H. Bill 1487 is an act concerning the state flag of Arkansas, to amend the law concerning the symbols within the state flag of Arkansas, to redesignate a star to commemorate the Native Americans who first inhabited Arkansas, and for other purposes. The bill will do two things. First, it will correct a historical fact in state code, as seen on page 2, line 26. It states that Michigan and Arkansas were admitted to the Union together on June 15, 1836. The new language will accurately state that the two states were admitted within just months of each other, Arkansas on June 15, 1836, and Michigan on January 26, 1837. The second change is to repurpose the blue star above the word Arkansas to commemorate the heritage and contribution of the Quapaw, Osage, and Caddo tribes and other Native American nations who inhabited Arkansas before France and Spain. This star, which currently is commemorated to the Confederate States of America, will be repurposed in state statute to accurately reflect the history and cultural competence of our great state of Arkansas. Why should we recognize Native American history? Arkansas was once home to numerous thriving Native American tribes, including the Quapaw, the Osage, the Caddo, the Tunica, and the Chickasaw. The name Arkansas is derived from the Native American word Arkansas, a name that refers to the Quapaw and means southern place. The forced migration of Native Americans along the Trail of Tears during the 1830s brought even more Native American tribes through Arkansas, such as the Cherokee, who established a large settlement along the Arkansas River Valley near Russellville before they were forced to move again, all while suffering from disease, drought, and attacks from both Native American tribes and neighboring settlers. The designation of the Menard Hodges site near Dumas, Arkansas as a National Historical Landmark in 1989, as well as the designation of other sacred sites in Arkansas under President Clinton's 1996 Executive Order 13007, has allowed the modern Caddo, Cherokee, Osage, Quapaw, and Tunica to reclaim their ancestral ties to Arkansas. Today, the Arkansas Archaeological Survey maintains that 10 research stations across the state that work to preserve the past of Arkansas's original people. Native American history and culture is an important part of the history of the state. For far too long, the heritage and culture of Native American tribes and nations have contributed to the history of the state of Arkansas has been overlooked, forgotten, and washed away. This bill will allow for the recognition of the first Arkansans to be honored on our state flag, just as the rest of the nations who control the state are. This bill is a course correction and a true inclusive effort to correct the history that has been rewritten for far too long. The Native American nations that have contributed to this state and continue to contribute to the state should be acknowledged and honored by Arkansans every day. Secondly, I believe that the context of why and when the star was added is very important. On February 26, 1913, the General Assembly adopted a design as the state's official flag that contained 3 stars. The 3 blue stars in the center field bore several meanings. First, that the state had successfully belonged to 3 countries, France, Spain, and the United States, before statehood. Secondly, that 1803 was the year of the Louisiana Purchase, which included present-day Arkansas, and that Arkansas was the 3rd state created from the purchase. The design remained unchanged until 1923, when the General Assembly added a 4th star to the center of the diamond to represent Arkansas's membership in the Confederate States of America. At first, the stars were arranged with 2 above and 2 below. But in the second extraordinary session of 1924, placed 3 stars below and 1 above, with the 3 stars still arranged in a downward triangle. So why in 1924, 60 years after the Civil War, was the star added? To truly understand the context and decision, we have to look at what was happening in the state around 1924. 5 years earlier was 1919, which in 1919, the Elaine Race Massacre was by far the deadliest racial confrontation in Arkansas's history, and possibly the bloodiest racial conflict in the history of the United States. While its deepest roots lay in the state's commitment to white supremacy, the events of
all right, we're going to stop right there. We're going to come back here in a minute. We're listening to State Representative Charles Blake from yesterday try to run his bill that would redesignate the Lone Star in the middle of the Arkansas flag. Well, there's actually 3 others, but there's 4 stars total, but there's 1 by itself that stands for Arkansas's time in the Confederacy. His argument, Representative Charles Blake's argument, is that it stands for the Ku Klux Klan, and he's going to go over what happened in the 1919, 1920, 1921, a lot of lynchings and things like that. State Representative Doug House will then interrupt him and say that he needs to, speak on the bill and not all of the lynchings and things like that. Again, this bill failed. It only got 8 yes votes. It needs 11. No, it only got 5 yes votes. It needs 11. There were 8 Republicans that voted against this, just to be on record saying they don't support this type of thing. Folks, we have seen this concept, this movement all throughout our country where, and I really want you to go and watch the video. Do you remember the video? We got to take a break, but remember the video where they have these millennials that pull down these Confederate statues and then start kicking the statues and like pile driving the statues and, wanting to like almost drop an elbow on the statues as if they're accomplishing something, as if they're ending racism. Now, I know you can make the argument this isn't about ending racism, but it's about being sensitive to those who are descendants and whose ancestors were slaves. And I understand that argument, but this will not stop at the star. That's what you have to look here. You have to look at the pattern. This doesn't stop at the star. It doesn't stop at separating Martin Luther King from Robert E. Lee. Slavery was terrible. We should remember it, learn from it, and make sure it never happens again. We got to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program this morning. Good morning to some of you taking your first sips of coffee. Thanks for doing that with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. I want to welcome back to the program. We've got State Representative Jimmy Gasway's on the line. He's calling in. Jimmy, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. I wanted to have you on just because I guess the last time we had you on, it was before the election. We were talking about tort reform and everything. That was something that was on the forefront of a lot of Arkansans' minds who were about to go to the polls and vote. And then, of course, the Supreme Court, threw it off the ballot, so no one actually got to vote on it. But now lawmakers are starting to relook at this issue and try again, from what I can tell. I've got a headline here, John Moritz in the Democrat Gazette this morning. Legislators...
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of...
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
So you have the, if we were to start going back in history, I got a problem with that star on the flag that represents Spain. Spain participated in slavery. Go look it up. Seriously, go look it up. Also, we belong to France. I'm very much offended by the French Revolution. I disagree with the French Revolution. Can you believe what the French did to their people there? All the blood, the blood that was shed in France's bloody revolution. Why should the Star of France be on our flag? That's offensive because nations have done things that are bad. The United States of America is not perfect. And yet there's a star. I mean, folks, quite honestly, the people on the radical left that want to get rid of things like the star that represents the Confederacy, they want to get rid of the American flag itself. I mean, this is something to remember. Now, I'm not saying State Representative Charles Blake wants to get rid of the American flag. I don't believe he does. But the leftist mentality here is one that is not something you can appease. It is something, let's get a little bit more. There is no satisfaction. Anyway, we're up against a hard break. We're going to be right back. I'm going to continue with more of this 92nd General Assembly coverage from yesterday. The bill failed to rename the star. new efforts to change tort laws in the state. In newest proposals, gone is control over rules, fees, caps, and damages stay. What are your thoughts on the process right now? And there are two competing ideas down there, right?
That's right. First of all, I guess I'm not that surprised to see it back. As you said, the Supreme Court struck issue 1 from the ballot, which was formerly SJR 8 when we voted on it in the legislature. I'm not sure that they're ever going to stop. So the special interests are back, and quite frankly, I'm not surprised. But the proposal is different this year. What they did the last time, of course, and the reason the Supreme Court struck it from the ballot is because they, as the Supreme Court said, impermissibly log rolled. They put about 4 different things into one proposed amendment. It did everything from capped attorney's fees to it capped punitive damages, it capped non-economic damages, it gave the legislature the power over court rulemaking authority. And then the Supreme Court said you can't put all those things into one amendment. People won't know what they're voting on. So they're back this year, and it just so happens that it's SJR 8 again. And this year they have kind of wised up a little bit, and they have limited the text to just allowing the legislature to set caps on punitive and non-economic damages. And so that's what the SJR 8 will do this year. And
so for people out there, Jimmy, for people out there who are not business owners, go over punitive damages, define that, and then define economic damages, non-economic damages.
Right. So punitive damages are the damages that we recognize in the law that are designed to punish bad actors. So if a large corporation, for example, you saw those in the thing is with the Ford Pinto case where they knew that the gas tanks would explode, but yet they made a conscious decision to, instead of correct the problem, just produce the cars with the defects and pay whatever damages might result. And so when that bad conduct was discovered, they were able to be punished, and you can't put a corporation in jail. And so the way we punish bad behavior by corporations is we allow punitive damages to be assessed against them where they have to.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. 870-275-9799. If you would like to contribute to the conversation, you can text that number this morning. Coming up at the top of the next hour, State Representative Julie Mayberry will be on to talk about her bill that would attempt to fund our roads without raising more money from us, meaning in tax increases. And then State Representative Laney Fight will be on at 7:33 to talk about increasing your property, your homestead property tax credit, which is something that if for some reason your county forgets to file on you, things go kind of crazy. I know from experience. All right, so we're covering the news here from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. The Arkansas Times piece here. Who wrote this? Is this Brantley's piece? Yeah, Brantley, the headline, "The Roll Call to Preserve a Confederate Tribute in Arkansas Flag. It's about slavery," said one Republican dissenter. Now, that highlights State Representative Jimmy Gazaway, who was somebody that actually voted for removing this. State Representative Gazaway is saying, let's see here, what will remain a historical fact is that the state of Arkansas and this country allowed the enslavement of an entire race of people. Much to our shame, much to our discredit, this bill is about being sensitive and considerate to the hundreds of thousands of people who live in this state, who are the descendants of people who were once slaves, who are not even considered human by our government. We owe it to the people of our state to recognize that and to be sensitive and to be considerate of that fact. Obviously, look, that's a position that some people have. They really believe that. I'm not one of those people that believes that we should constantly be looking to our past, because there's good in our past, there's bad in our past, and if we're constantly trying to edit, you would say rewrite, I would say edit the history. I would say erase the history in many aspects, right? It's just, but it also comes down to votes. You either got the votes to do it or you don't. State Representative Charles Blake didn't have the votes to do it. Let's actually get back to some of the testimony. Here is State Representative Charles Blake. We're going to pick right back up where we left off here in this debate, because eventually the committee starts asking him questions. Again, he wants to. It failed yesterday with only 5 yes votes. It needed 11. Here is State Representative Charles Blake.
Race relations and growing concerns about labor unions. A shooting incident that occurred at the meeting of the Progressive Farmers and Household Union caused mob violence. And although the exact number of blacks who were killed range between 100 and 280, that number is not known. So 5 years before 1924, you had one of the bloodiest race massacres in U.S. history. Around that time, in 1919, Samuel McIntyre from St. Francis County was lynched. In 1919, Frank Livingston in Union County was lynched. In 1919, Clyde Ellison in Lincoln County was lynched. Clint Braggs, 1919, Lincoln County, lynched. Alexander Wilson, Lee County, 1919, lynched. Jordan Jameson, Columbia County, in 1919 was lynched. 1920, J.W. Gibson in Phillips County was lynched. 1920, Wade Thomas, Craighead County, lynched. 1921, Henry Lyle, Mississippi County, lynched. 1921, Browning Tuggle, Hempstead County, lynched. 1921, Philip Slater in Drew County, lynched. 1921, Leroy Smith in Deshay County, lynched. William Turner was lynched in 1921 in Phillips County.
Representative Blake, hold up. Representative House, you have a...
I am setting context of why this star was added in 1924.
Representative House, if you would you turn your mic on?
Mr. Chairman, the representative is not speaking to the bill at this point and should be cautioned to keep his presentation confined to the merits of the bill, and that's my...
I will continue to speak on the context. I will continue to speak on the context of why the star was added in 1924.
Just a minute, Representative Blake. Okay, thank you, Representative House.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it. Representative Blake, just as a caution, make sure you stay on the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Tosh.
Okay, thank you.
In 1922, 6 other men were lynched between Conway and Pulaski County. In 1923, there was 2 more lynchings. And in 1925 through 1936, there were a total of 10 more lynchings in the state of Arkansas. So, to add that, I want to move into why, in 1924, the context of why this star was added. From 1922 to 1924, there was a movement in the state politics. The Ku Klux Klan became the most powerful political member of the state of Arkansas. Many members were elected into the General Assembly in 1924. According to the White Robes in Politics, the Arkansas Ku Klux Klan in 1924 through 1922, there were the 22 and 23 years marked the turning point for the Klan in Arkansas, and indeed that order of parts of the country. 1924 is known as the climax of power of the Ku Klux Klan in political parties.
Yes, they were Democrats. That's true.
Referring to the bill, what I'm what I want you all to understand is that this star in 1924, which was put on to the flag 60 years after the Civil War ended, is important and it matters. But one could argue that the star was not added to the flag to honor the Confederate States of America. The star, in context of the time of 1924 in that period, was added to add presence and prominence of white supremacy in the state of Arkansas. It's an ugly history, but we have to be honest about our history. But we can fix that. We can fix that area in judgment. So why did I choose this method? It doesn't cost anything. We're literally changing words in statute that it's simple. With a yes vote, you are correcting a mistake that was made a century ago. We are honoring our history.
All right, let's stop for a second, Joe, because I would like to address a few things. That's State Representative Charles Blake. Excuse me. And we're going to get right back to some of this audio here in a minute. I want to talk about this. So yeah, the Democrat Party is the party of Jim Crow, is the party of slavery, Robert Byrd was a Democrat. And isn't it interesting? Barack Obama, didn't he eulogize Robert Byrd? Interesting. Anyway, so Charles Blake, this bill failed, only got 5 votes, went down in flames, but it has certainly inflamed. It's inflaming the people on the left today. If you got any leftists who read any kind of Arkansas news today, they're going to be outraged at your General Assembly. But the people back home, the constituents, I think, largely agree that we've got to stop this constant need to look backwards. Because here's the thing, you can always look backwards. You know, State Representative Charles Blake wants to name that star, wants to make that star about Native Americans. Native Americans, they had slaves. Native Americans did things that were not necessarily good by our standards today. I mean, you can go back and find anything wrong because there are no perfect, except for Jesus. There is no perfect person that's ever lived on this planet. You can go back and find any civilization, something wrong with it that we find morally repugnant today. And that's why this has got to stop. It has got to stop. And I'm so glad that this committee did what they did and defeated this bill. Matter of fact, speaking of Native Americans, the Gazette writes, as the committee adjourned and its members filed out of the room, another lawmaker who is on the panel, State Representative Jack Ladyman, a Republican from Jonesboro, could be heard remarking about, quote, Indians, end quote, to a colleague. We're putting them on the flag after they fought against us? Ladyman asked, standing just in front of a reporter. That's a great question. That's a great point as well. Not to mention that they're not the first Arkansans. You can always go back and find somebody else somewhere that owned a piece of land somewhere. I mean, come on, you know. Let's just talk about Pangea for a moment, right? Right? I mean, if you look at how the continents, kind of fit together like a puzzle, I'm sure Arkansas was somebody else's land before it was Native American land. Well, why not name it after the buffalo? I'm sure there were more buffalo around here, or some animal or something. It's just ridiculous. You can always go back further. You know, people want to say, well, that land, Texas and New Mexico, that's really Mexico's land. You better give that land back. Well, it's not Mexico's land anymore. It's our land now. As Americans, it's our land. And you know what? Mexico took apart a big chunk of Guatemala's land. You think Mexico wants to give that land back? No. Anyway, my point is, you can always go further and further back. And here in Arkansas is a sovereign state. This is a novel concept, but specifically since we're talking about the Civil War and slavery, we're a sovereign state. So we have been a part of the rule of, these different countries. And it makes a lot of sense. The Confederate star on the flag makes sense when you realize what the other 3 stars stand for. Picking back up with State Representative Charles Blake's testimony yesterday as he was running this bill that failed, let's keep going.
Our heritage and history. It's easy. It allows the state to move in a direction that is inclusive and honest. And I'll take questions.
Any questions from committee members? Representative Miller, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Blake, you said early on in your presentation that your bill was going to accurately depict history.
Yes, sir.
My question is, has the current statute inaccurately depicting history?
Yes. I stated that in the very first. There is a statement that says that Arkansas and Michigan were both added on June 15, 1836. I'm sorry, 1836, which is not true. That's on page 2, line 26.
Follow-up.
Recognized for a follow-up.
So, by changing the meaning of this star to honor the Native Americans, which I think we can all have some appreciation for, that's going to fix the inaccurate depiction of history that we've had in state statute for the last nearly 100 and something years.
Well, I stated earlier that it does two things. It corrects inaccuracies, and the bill becomes and the bill makes our state more culturally competent by repurposing a star to represent and to honor those Native American tribes who haven't been recognized for so many years. And I think it does that. Thank you.
Representative Clowney, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Blake. I appreciate your giving us that historical context. I think it's critical. I teach history. I think history is so important because of the effects that it has on us today. Would you be willing to speak a little bit to the lasting effects that you think this particular designation in the Arkansas Code has on your constituents or on Arkansans more broadly?
Yes, symbols matter. Just as I said in this room about 4 years ago, and just as the governor stated a few years ago, that when we can make ourselves look more attractive to the globe, if it deals with economy, with history, with being inclusive, we have to correct those changes. I wear this pen on my chest every day. And on this pen, there's a star, which represents the Confederate States of America. Some people would be offended by that. I'm not trying to be politically correct whatsoever. I'm saying let's be mindful. Let's say that there are third and fourth graders in this state every day that learn Arkansas history and learn what the state flag means. There is nothing wrong with people knowing that Arkansas was Confederate state. We have a monument right outside that lets everyone know we're a Confederate state. But moving forward, for our next generation, for people who are looking at us, we can do the right thing and say, hey, we are inclusive. We understand that at one point this star represented the Confederate States of America, and that's fine that it did, but we fixed it. Thank you.
Representative Godfrey, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Blake, very few of us around this table have the lived experience of being a person of color, and you mentioned cultural competence. Can you speak to all of us around the table, but particularly those of us who do not share your lived experience, the importance of listening to, including, and elevating the voices of color who are impacted in this discussion and not just making the decision based on our own limited lived experience?
We have, for far too long,
does anyone care how the global community views Arkansas? Honest question.
Statues that affect the majority of people in this state. All of these issues, all of these decisions we're making affect all Arkansans. And we have to be mindful every day of that child who is African American in class and is learning about slavery and is learning about the Civil War and says, why do we still honor, why do I salute daily to a flag that has the star of the Confederate States of America, which at one point fought in the Civil War, and having to explain all of the reasons why the Confederate States and why the Union fought each other, but saying that was our past. We can move forward. We understand that may be offensive, and we can change symbols, not so much history, just the symbols. Thank you, Representative Goffard.
Representative Payton, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
This is a pretty simple explanation.
You took a lot
this
of
we were a
liberty
member
in
of this union, then this union, then this union, then this union, and then back to the other union.
1925 and passed a resolution to attribute that this star meant something. And I think a lot of the motives and a lot of the things that you expounded on cannot be found in that resolution or in that code that they passed. How would you feel if 90 or 100 years from now, somebody looked back and attributed motives to why we would vote for your bill? And in context, we currently have Native American tribes building casinos that the citizens of the state of Arkansas just passed a amendment to say they could build casinos. And so 90 years from now, somebody looks back and says, well, Representative Payton was just all about the money-hungry taxes that we're going to get from casinos, and so they rededicated this star for that purpose. I wouldn't appreciate that. And I'm sure that if the men and women that voted on this in 1925 were here, they wouldn't appreciate the liberty you took in assigning their motives as to why they put it on there. What we have is the language that put the star on the flag. And if we're going to honor our heritage, and we're going to allow other people to honor their heritage, then I believe that it's an affront for us to assign motives to the people that voted to put this on there that's not in the code. So how would you feel if somebody 90 years from now came up with, you're not going to be here to argue about it, came up with a whole set of motives and said, this is why Representative Blake ran this bill?
If they were doing exactly what I was doing, was setting the historical context, which is factual, the historical context of that time period. I didn't take any liberties in history. I didn't take any liberties in fact. That was the actual facts of things that were happening between 1919 and 1925. Now, if the liberties were taking, I didn't assign motives. I set a context of the time period. Now, I said, in my opinion, one could say. In your opinion, one could say something else. But if someone looked 90 years from now and said, this is why he did this, and they want to look at the historical context of what's happening in 2018, 2019, and 2020, they have the right to say, this is the historical context. This is what we believe.
Well, and as you noticed, I gave you some historical context that they could attribute to this. 65%
of the state voted for the casino bill. So I'm asking what would be the motives. I'm still lost on the.
If I could follow up, I'll try to clarify that.
Okay.
Follow up with a question, Representative Payton.
Thank you. That constitutional amendment that passed just put it in the Arkansas Constitution that certain tribes would be allowed to open the casino.
Was it certain tribes, or was it? I don't think the tribes were in the Constitution, were they?
I believe so. But thank you. We're off the bill now.
We need to get back on the bill, and y'all can have that debate at a later date. But
I see you at 1 o'clock, Peyton.
Just a minute, Representative Blake. Representative Clowney, you have a question. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one's quick. Representative Blake, can you just quickly answer, where is the star that represents the Confederacy, commemorates the Confederacy? Where is that star on the flag relative to the star that commemorates the United States of America?
Well, we got to take a break here. Anyway, the bill failed, ladies and gentlemen. It failed with only 5 yes votes. And there was a very vigorous debate. You can check this out at the Arkansas House website if you want to watch the full proceedings. We're going to take a break. I'm going to be back here in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799.
Pay out. And so that's punitive damages. Again, those are damages designed to punish. And then there are non-economic damages, which SJR 8 would also cap. And those are the damages that we recognize in the law for pain and suffering. Loss and permanent disfigurement, loss of a bodily member or function, a permanent disfigurement, and loss of life. And so, that was one of the biggest objections. It was certainly the biggest problem that I had with the Tort Reform Amendment Issue 1 last time was the cap on non-economic damages, because it puts a value, or it will allow the legislature to put a cap or a value on a human life, because that's part of the definition of non-economic damages, the loss of life. And that's why, I sort of object to it and objected to it last time.
Okay, so you're telling me right now.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
The question that I have in the context of all of this is, if you're going to take away that star's meaning and replace it with something else because it's offensive, wouldn't the teaching of the history also be offensive? So why are we teaching the history at all to our kids about slavery if we're afraid of a star that represents the Confederate States of America that fought for slavery, or they fought for states' rights? Why teach the history at all if it's so offensive? To me, it doesn't seem consistent. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem consistent. I got a text message here. If Blake wanted to add a star to recognize the Native Americans, I could support that. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. What else do we have here? Let's see here. We were talking about... I got an idea. Here's a joke. Let's just get a bill that takes the... Let's rename that star, and let's make it just commemorative for the Republican Party, and then let's ban the Democrat Party. How about that? I'm just joking. We got 1 more hour coming your way next. Talk. Trying to fund our road without raising taxes back.
talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Now, what they're debating is they're just debating whether or not they should be able to have a debate on what the cap should be for punitive or non-economic damages. Now, there are two proposals out there. Now, I understand one would just allow the legislature to cap punitive damages, and then the other would allow them to cap both. Do I have that right?
That's right. So there has been another amendment, a proposed amendment filed. Senator Stubblefield in the Senate and Representative Cap in the House have filed alternative amendment that would allow the legislature to only cap punitive damages. And just to speak on that briefly, my thoughts on that, I don't necessarily like it, but given, I had to choose between the two, between allowing the legislature to cap punitive and non-economic, or just allowing the legislature to cap punitive, I would rather allow the legislature to just cap punitive because, those are damages that don't get assessed that often, and it's something that might truly have an effect on the business community. And an argument that I hear pretty often for capping punitive damages is that we allow the legislature, for example, to set a range of punishment in a criminal case. And so, when the Constitution would recognize you don't have cruel and unusual punishments, the legislature, in its authority, can set a range of punishment for a crime. And, the analogy would be that the legislature should also be able to set a cap on the punitive damage, which is designed to punish, just like we set a range of punishment. But quickly, I do want to make a distinction between setting a cap on punitive, again, which I don't really like, but I'm okay with, and setting a cap on non-economic damages, because I think there's an important distinction. Make a person whole. And I'm talking about people in this state who are injured, who, they may be a paraplegic, quadriplegic, they may be permanently disabled, they may be scarred beyond recognition, or they may be, the family members of someone who'd lost their life. And when we cap the jury's ability to award damages for that, we have gone too far, and we have entered into a realm where the legislature doesn't have any business. That's the province of a jury. And since 1874 in the Arkansas Constitution, it always has been.
We are talking with State Representative Jimmy Gazaway from District 57, talking about these competing tort reform measures that are being talked about right now. Well, let me ask you this, Jimmy: is there any realm, when we say this word tort reform or this phrase tort reform, do you think that there's anything out here that needs to be done right now? I mean, because I do hear from some business owners out there who do want some sort of tort reform to try to stop what they call frivolous lawsuits. People that actually even attempt to fake injuries, at their stores and things like that, and then sue the company. Is that just something people have to tolerate, or is there something that can be done to try to address those issues?
I don't think so. I think that it is an issue that we have to look at seriously. I've heard those same concerns, and I'm not going to say that they aren't legitimate concerns. One of the things that I proposed last session when we looked at this issue was, giving the judges more power to assess fines against attorneys who are deemed to have filed a frivolous lawsuit, and to make the other side have to pay the attorney's fees of, someone who's had a frivolous lawsuit filed against them. I think there are common sense things like that would go a long way to curbing, frivolous lawsuits to the extent that we have them. I think there are some common sense things like that. But capping non-economic damages,
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, happy Thursday. We're almost to the weekend. Good morning to everybody out there. Thanks so much for being with us. And you found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine here. And we want you to be a part of that. You can text us this morning at 870-275-9799. Folks, we've been talking a lot about how we are going to fund our roads. We've been talking about it, but there's probably been people talking even more about it, and down at the Capitol, the 92nd General Assembly. A lot of people have been working hard on this. It's unfortunate that it seems to be that the predominant plan is going to go forward and raise our taxes at the wholesale level with gas and diesel, which would mean more money coming out of our pockets. There is, however, a plan that was filed, and a lot of people are taking a look at it now. It's House Bill 1541. It is by State Representative Julie Mayberry, a Republican from Hensley. She joins us on the line now. State Representative Mayberry, thanks for coming on this morning.
Hey, thank you for having me and helping me get this information out to people, because I think most people think this is the only plan. I think overall, we are all in agreement that we have kicked this can down the road so many times, session after session. This is not new conversation that we need highway funding, but now the can is in a pothole and we need to do something and we have to come out with a plan. I just don't agree with the plan that's being presented. I want to be for something, not against something.
Right.
And so I always believe if you want to complain about something, at least give an alternative, give another idea. And so that's why I filed House Bill 1541. I actually have two other bills that would kind of help as well, but 1541 is probably the more concise, long-term plan. And I wish I could tell you it was my idea. It's not. It's an idea that was presented in 2013. It was a blue ribbon committee that put the main bill together. Former State Representative Jonathan Barnett, who is also the Republican Party committee man, presented the bill and could not get it out of the Transportation Committee back in 2013. And it's a good bill, and it needs to be talked about again. And that's all I'm trying to do is say, hey, this was very well vetted. It had 67 House sponsors. It's a great idea. Let's look at this idea again.
And, I was talking to a legislator yesterday who supports the governor's plan. And he said that he loves the idea of taking everything that's used for driving or road purposes, from the sales and use tax of revenue like your bill does, for new and used vehicles, trailers, semi-trailers. All of this should be directed toward road use. I think most people think that is common sense, and but it doesn't appear that that's something that the leadership is ready to do right now. Let me ask you this, State Representative Julie Mayberry. Is the main reason you've put out this plan that doesn't raise taxes, is it because you don't like the fact that the other plan does raise taxes?
Oh, absolutely. If there was another plan that didn't raise taxes, I'd be all over it. We need highway funding, but I think we need to look within. When I need money around my house, I look at where I can save money. What can I do without? Can I get rid of Netflix? Can I get rid of my phone? Can I get rid of, let's see what we can do within. And I think that that's what we need to do with our current government. What money do we currently have, and how should we be directing that money? And that's what this plan does. Over a period of 10 years, we would gradually transfer money from the sale of the new and used vehicles over to the highway fund. So there would not be any major hit in any one year. It would be 10% one year, 20% the next year, 30 all the way up. I do not have a fiscal impact yet. The FNA, I'm sure it's taking a little bit of time to get it to me, but I can go back to the 2013 fiscal impact, and in year one, it's $22 million. By year 10, it was $345 million.
Wow.
And the wonderful thing about that idea is that we meet as a legislature every other year, and if somewhere along the line our economy tanks or we need to make adjustments, we still can. If we pass this half-cent sales tax, it's permanent. It's in our Constitution, and it does not have a sunset clause. And that would be much more difficult to change. This is still fluid, and if we decide that, the economy is not growing at 3%, there are protections in there to make sure that we're not taking away from any our adequacy funding and all the other things that are really important. It only goes into effect if there's 3% growth. And I feel confident in that. We have casino money that's going to be coming in. And if that casino money starts coming in, and we just passed some other tax cuts, if the tax cuts do what you expect them to do, our economy should be growing. And back in 2013, I think that there were other things that might have been of concern at that time. We had Obamacare pushed on us and a lot of other issues that were kind of a priority at that time. We've taken care of those things.
Yeah.
This is the time to bring this plan back up.
You mentioned Obamacare. I mean, when it comes to Arkansas Works, originally at this time, a couple of years ago, I think 4 years ago, that was projected to cost us $50 million. And of course, I think this year it's actually costing us $138 million. And so, that's a lot of money that could go to roads that we have allocated somewhere else. You mentioned Republican National Committeeman Jonathan Barnett. And as a matter of fact, that's interesting because I already had scheduled, after our interviews concluded, I went back and I found the video, State Representative Mayberry, from 2011, where Jonathan Barnett was on the House floor, then State Representative, and he was presenting HJR 1001. And this was the bill that everyone voted on that had a sales tax increase to fund for specific projects with a sunset clause. And he assured, and he can't bind future legislators. No one can. But I just think it's if you go back and listen to it and you get this assurance, this is a temporary tax, it's going to go away. But it's now the plan is to send it back to the voters to make it a permanent tax. And I think that just fuels the skepticism that citizens have when it comes to believing what the government tells them. What do you think about that?
Rightfully so. I think that, no, I was not there. My husband was there in 2013, and he was saying at the time, any time that we hear that a tax is going to sunset, don't believe it, because that usually doesn't happen. People get used to paying it, and they say, oh, well, you're used to paying this. This is not an increase, and blah, blah, blah. Well, most of the time that ends up, happening. I think we need to keep our promise that this ends. Let's let it end. So yes, I'm definitely opposed to that too. I very frustrating up here because it is Republican-led legislature, and these should not be the issues that we're dealing with. These should not be on the table.
Well, and the other side says, if I can play devil's advocate, they say that they've kicked the can down the road as well. Now, I think the can we're kicking is actually we're just not cutting spending. Because the revenue is increasing every year to the government. We're just spending it instead of saving it to spend on roads. But they say we've kicked the can down the road to the point where, and I've even had legislators tell me, Julie, that they want to cut spending, but they've tried to have that conversation over the last several years. But there is no movement there. And in the meantime, the roads are degrading to a point where they get even more expensive to fix. If they get bad enough, you can't repair them. You have to redo them. That's what they say. So I guess I understand that argument, but I don't think the answer. I think there's got to be a better answer than taxing the people. I let you respond to that, but I also would like for you to talk a little bit about where this goes from here, because the more popular plan, or let's say the governor's plan, is going to be voted on today in the House, I believe. And if that passes, I wonder if your bill will even be heard in committee.
Well, I first will tell you, I don't believe it's going to be voted on today. It was not on our 2-day calendar and yesterday, so therefore it cannot be voted on today. So it'll probably be moved to Monday. It should have been. It passed on Tuesday. Typically, we would vote on it on Thursday, but it was not on our calendar. So I don't know the reason behind that, but they did not. It's not happening today. So we still have time to contact legislators and voice your opinion and make them think a little bit more about this plan. So I did want to say that. I'm forgetting the other question you asked.
Oh, no, it was just, you already answered it. You're not for the tax increases. I'm not for the tax increases. But what they say is we've kicked the can down the road because the roads are so degraded and they're crumbling and they get more expensive. If you let them get bad enough, they get even more expensive. So people are tired. Some people are telling me, they're like, well, it's like triage. I don't want to vote for the tax increase, but at the same time, the highway department, they're saying the roads are getting so bad that they get more expensive if you keep not funding them.
Right. And I do agree. That's why we need a plan, because it is more expensive. But that's why House Bill 1541 is a great way to go, because it doesn't hit all at once. It is a gradual 10% one year, 20% next year, and gradually increasing that income. We didn't have income tax cuts all in 1 year, because that's very hard to do, to impose it all in 1 year. This is a very gradual plan. And again, if we get 5 years down the road and we say, this is not working out, I don't think we can continue at this pace, then you can come up with something else. And that's the beauty of it. Nothing happens too quickly. It's gradually transferring that money based on growth, based on that revenue growth. And then that also kind of controls the spending in some of the other areas. And when you have a budget that you have to stick to, you will find ways to trim it.
That's exactly right.
Just look at your own personal finances. When you don't have that money coming in the door, you will eat out less. You will buy less clothing. You will, you'll make a decision. Do we want to take this trip or not? I mean, whatever it is, you will adjust to that income. But it's certainly easier to adjust when it's done over time than when it's all at one time.
We're talking with State Representative Julie Mayberry, and she's the sponsor of this great bill, HB 1541, attempting to fund our roads without raising taxes. It's as simple as you can get. Now, what she's saying is it's not going to be heard today, and she's right. That means you have time. So it really just comes down to this. This really cruised through the Senate. If you don't want to pay more at the pump, then you need to call your legislator, and you just need to tell them, hey, I would really like for you to maybe look more at HB 1541 and not do the governor's plan, which is going to raise taxes, and the Senate's plan, which is going to raise taxes because we're taxed enough already. And I'm told, State Representative Mayberry, I'm told that it's not on today's calendar because it was amended yesterday to remove State Representative Brant Smith. Okay, so then I guess, is that why it's delayed? Because if you amend something, it's got to sit a little longer. Is that right?
It has to sit a little longer. That is part of it. But I didn't know if maybe the plan was to hold it as well anyway. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know the exact details on that, but he did remove his name. So I was very glad to see that. I hear some say, well, it's just a few pennies. What's 3 pennies? Well, let me just ask you this question and ask your listeners this question. If you're driving down the highway, which I'm sure there's people listening driving down the highway right now, you need gas. You pull over, you see one gas station that's $2.10, and across the street you see a gas station that's $2.13. Which gas station do you go to?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly
You go to
right.
the one that's $2.10. And I promise you, you're going to choose. If you don't choose that one, there's something a little odd.
Yep.
But you just proved to yourself that 3 pennies matters, and it continues, to go up. We right now we have gas prices that are on the lower side. I mean, I wish they were even lower than they are. But remember, our gas prices can go up $3, almost $4. We've experienced that, and I had people telling me, I have to choose whether I go to the grocery store or not, or, go to work. I've got to now carpool. I mean, it really does. It does matter.
Last question.
Can add up.
Last question. The first part of this plan of the governor's plan are the tax increases, the new tax at the wholesale gas and diesel. The second provision is referring to the people to not let the tax sunset that was passed in 2012 and make it permanent. Do you consider that a new tax?
That's a very interesting question, because there is, I think, some debate on whether it will require 51 votes or 75 votes in the House to pass this tax on the increase in. And we have an amendment in our Constitution that says that if you increase a current tax, it requires the 75 votes in the House. So there is some question as to how many votes it actually will take to pass this.
Interesting.
And I don't know if that's been made really clear, but that is definitely something that we need to look at.
I agree. State Representative Julie Mayberry, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming up with creative ideas to not raise our taxes, and I think we need way more of that in Little Rock. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Folks,
okay.
We're going to take a break here, going to reset, and then I'm going to play for you a flashback from 2011. Don't go anywhere.
Capping a jury's ability, which, by the way, we preach local control. We hear that preached in Little Rock so much. But there's nothing more local than a jury. And capping a jury's ability to award damages to make somebody whole, who, again, may be paraplegic or quadriplegic, who may have been abused or neglected in a nursing home, or in a situation where someone has lost their life. That's wrong, and they're at it again, and that's what we're up against.
So if they go through with this, one or the other, if they go with the amended version that's saying, hey, we want to have the ability to debate about how much the cap should be on punitive damages, or if they go with, we want to have the ability to have the discussion. Of course, we know special interest will be involved. I mean, if they were to have that ability to discuss it in past future legislation.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, so we are broadcasting here from the Answer Studios in Little Rock, 101.1 FM. The Answer, we appreciate them hosting us. We're going to do a flashback here. You can talk about this half-cent sales tax increase that was passed with a sunset clause in it. They want to eliminate the sunset clause. They want to have you vote on it again. Well, let's go listen to what State Representative at the time, Jonathan Barnett, said back on March 24th of 2011 about the plan to raise the tax to begin with. Listen to this.
And use tax for state highways and bridges and county and city roads, bridges and other surface transportation with state revenue, securing 4-lane highway construction and improvement bonds.
Mr. Barnett, you're recognized to present your resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I come today to this body to again talk about and present House Joint Resolution 1001. This has been a highly debated bill this session. I know a lot of you all have had a lot of discussion on this, and I've talked to, I think, every member that's present in the body myself concerning this House Joint Resolution. This is a resolution, as you all well know, that refers to the people an opportunity to have a half-cent general sales tax increase to go toward a 10-year highway bond program. All the provisions contingent on this approval of the ballot question are by the voters at the November 2012 general election. And as I said, it is a temporary 0.5% general sales tax increase. The temporary is the reason why we call it temporary, because it does have a sunset clause. This increase does not apply to food or food ingredients. It authorizes the Commission to issue up to $1.3 billion in general obligation bonds. The revenue derived from this program is to be used for 4-lane highway construction or improvements, including adding capacity to existing 4-lane interstate highways. The proceeds from the AHTD's portion, the Highway Department's portion of the tax, is dedicated to retiring the bond debt over 10 years. The tax expires when the bonds are retired, which again is approximately 10 years. The revenue from this half-cent tax is to be divided traditionally in the formula that we've used for many, many years in this state, and that is the 70-15-15, which is among the state, the counties, and the cities. So approximately $160 million per year will go to the State Highway Department, $34 million will go to the counties, $34 million will go to the cities, and this is new revenue annually for the life of the bonds to these three agencies. 1 penny of the existing current motor fuel tax, which is approximately $20 million, will be permanently dedicated to creating a state aid street fund to be used on city streets off the state highway network system, and this provision will not expire when the 0.5% tax expires. So 1 penny of the 21.5-cent existing flat gas tax that's on the books today, 1 penny of that will transfer to the cities, and it will be it'll be a permanent city aid program even after the 10 years is up. If all bonds are issued, the construction totaling approximately $1.8 billion could be undertaken on selected routes over a 10-year period. As you all well know, if you've listened to the highway program's presentation in different committees this year, and I know a lot of you all went out to the highway department before you came into office, and you were educated a little bit about how the highway department works and how it's funded. You all have noted that over the last 20 years, the revenue at the highway department has been very flat. If you look at the revenue in state government in all the state agencies, you notice that it's got a pretty good curve to it. It's about a 45-degree curve as far as the increase of state money to the state agencies and the general revenues of the state of Arkansas. This is not true at the highway department. Since we have a flat tax, and we basically have not had a tax increase for roads in this state since 1991, and I think there was a 3-cent a gallon tax that was increased at that time.
All right, so we
did have the 1999.
So you hear some of the same arguments there at the end there, that the revenue is very flat and everything else. That's the exact same arguments that we're hearing now. This was a flat. This was from 2011. Okay, if you're just joining us, what you just heard is from 2011. That is State Representative Jonathan Barnett. He is no longer state representative. He is, I think, a National Republican committee man now. But this was something that was sold. If you listen to the very beginning of the audio, this was something that was sold as temporary. Temporary. I think he said it at least 3, maybe 4 times. We're going to raise it by a half cent, and then it's going to go. We're going to put it to the people to vote. They're going to pass it. We did in 2012. We passed it. And it's a temporary sales tax that will expire in 2022, meaning 10 years later. Okay, we're almost to the 10 years. And so you have this promise. The legislature's told it's going to be temporary. The people are told it's going to be temporary. You know, the fact that it was temporary is one of the reasons Republicans, could get behind that. Jonathan Barnett was a Republican. This was in 2011 that he was running this. So I'm just telling you, it's very frustrating from a citizen standpoint that they're not going to let the tax sunset. They're going to put it back on the ballot, and they're going to claim that it's, that they're just going to let the people decide again. But the fact is, what we voted on constitutionally was supposed to go away. And this plan, this is the part of the plan I dislike it almost more than the gas tax increase, almost more. It fuels the skepticism that people have about government. It confirms my worldview as a limited government conservative. Once the government gets a certain level of taxpayer money, it's like they're drug addicts. I'm not saying they are literally drug addicts, but that's a pretty good analogy, isn't it? Taxpayer money is the opium for government bureaucrats and politicians. I mean, that'll be fascinating to watch. I guess, but this will be a constitutional amendment. Is that what this would be again?
It absolutely would be, and so I want to address two of the points that you just made there. Number one, this will be a constitutional amendment, and so I think that the natural question would be, why are we amending the Constitution to give the legislature the power to put caps on punitive and potentially non-economic damages? And the answer to that, I know that we've got a lot of patriots out there listening, a lot of constitutionalists out there listening, and I think this is important to know that since 1874 in the Arkansas Constitution, it's Article resulting in death or for injuries to persons or property. And in cases of death, for such injuries, the right of action shall survive, and the General Assembly shall prescribe for whose benefit such action shall be prosecuted. So again, it goes back to that general provision that exists in the Constitution that has been in there since 1874, that no act of the General Assembly shall limit the amount of damages to be recovered for injuries resulting in death or for injuries to persons or property. That was amended in 1938 by Amendment 26, which set up the workers' compensation system in Arkansas. And so in workers' comp situations, we do recognize some limits for different kinds of injuries and things like that, because that was a measure that was designed to protect employers. But the reason they have to amend the Constitution is because that provision that says the General Assembly, no act of the General Assembly shall limit damages in death or for injuries resulting to persons or property, they have to amend that section of the Constitution that's been in there since 1874.
What was going on in 1874 to make them amend it then?
Well, that was when our Constitution was drafted following the Civil War. And so...
Okay, it seems like I heard, maybe I'm mistaken, it seems like I heard, there was a lot of, I don't know if it had to do with the railroad. It seems like I heard it go ahead.
You're right. There were, and Joey McCutcheon is kind of the expert on this, but I do recall that back then, basically the railroads had almost complete immunity, and they were trying to have laws passed that would limit their liability if the railroads killed someone, and so that was in.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back. Good morning to everybody out there. Some of you are having your first sip of coffee at 7:33, and you've overslept, or at least by my standards, you've overslept. If you're just now having that first sip of coffee, come on, guys, come on. Welcome back to the show. Hey, we were going over this week. We went over the Conduit scorecard. Okay, I did this, I think, on Tuesday. There's a YouTube video of it. There's a few bills that are really, really good. We just talked with State Representative Julie Mayberry about her bill that is attempting to fund roads, get some new ideas out there to fund our roads, but without raising the taxes. There's another bill on there. That's actually the top of the list, House Bill 1321, which is a homestead property tax credit increase. So that's not a tax increase. It's a tax credit increase. So it's think of it like a tax cut. It's by State Representative Lanny Fight, a Republican from Benton, and he joins us now on the phone. State Representative Lanny Fight, thank you so much for coming on, sir.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
Yes, sir. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about how this idea came to you and why you wanted to do it.
Okay. House Bill 1321, what it does, everyone who owns their house gets a property tax credit. Right now, that tax credit is $350 that comes straight off your taxes. And I proposed to increase it to $375, and we had a fund balance of $104 million, which I believe was created from the Amazon tax that went on here last year. And also, we've got good growth in our state right now. So that's what caused that fund balance of $104 million. And it would only cost $12.5 million to increase it from $350 to $375. And then I wanted to put that balance in an interim study and see how we could turn it back to the people, or maybe cut the tax itself. I have sent sales tax funds this property tax relief. And that was the purpose of my bill right there.
Wow. So you're saying we got this fund with like $110 million in it, and you're saying, hey, you know what? If we raise that tax credit $25, for everybody out there that's owning a home, then that's only cost $12 million out of that 110.
Right. And we need to see over the next 2 years while the interim study's going. We would determine if that number is not an outlier, which I don't think it is, and see how much it increases. And then that would tell us how much we could increase the property tax relief, or say we could cut the sales tax that funds that too also,
Wow.
That's one of the things I would like to study in the interim study.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a wait and see. It's kind of a gradual approach. A lot of people might say, hey, now I get a credit of $25 extra. That's not very much. But, with the way things are going right now, Lanny, I kind of think anything that's good for the taxpayer, any amount of money that's going back into the pockets of the taxpayer is something to celebrate.
Yes. Back in 1979, what had happened, a lot of the counties, nearly all the counties had quit assessing, and Amendment 79 came along, and everybody was forced into going back to reassessing the properties like they should. And so to give relief to the people, they passed Amendment 79, which guarantees a $300 tax credit. But as this fund grows and this money, the people are paying this money, and it's the people's money, and it should be turned back to them if there's surplus in that. And that's my feelings.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, just on if you just look at what the bill does point by point, the reason I'm so interested in it, State Representative Fight, is because it improves economic freedom, because it's just allowing us to keep more of our money if you use the tax credit each year. Matter of fact, I got a funny story on this. I guess a couple of years ago, we moved, and I found out that somehow I didn't have the homestead property tax credit filed or something. And I figured that out, I guess a couple of weeks ago, because, the mortgage company was like, hey, your taxes just went up like $400 or something. And anyway, so it really does help. This tax credit helps a whole lot. Especially if your mortgage is doing the property tax side of things. So,
well, a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, and property taxes come due in October, and it's a large amount usually if you own your property, and so this is very helpful.
Yeah.
Most taxes you kind of pay as you go, but the property tax is where you pay it all at once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And I know that the sponsor on the Senate side that's running this is State Representative Blake Johnson. He's also a Republican from Corning. And just want to make sure I mention that. So where is the bill right now, HB 1321? Where is it right now in the process?
It got killed yesterday in the Senate, in the committee. They failed it.
Okay, well, so tell us about that. Tell us why. What was the debate on that?
Well, there was no debate on it. I explained it, and I introduced it a couple weeks ago, and they wanted an amendment in it. I had in the original bill a formula and how we would turn it back to the people, and I wanted to study that formula in an interim study for 2 years. And some of them didn't like that, so I took that out and just said we would do an interim study of the fund balance. I went and explained it again. It's a very simple bill, just increases from 350 to 375, and do an interim study on the fund balance. And, it failed.
Which committee? Which committee was it in?
And this was a Revenue and Tax in the Senate.
Huh. Okay. That's interesting.
Now there's another bill coming from the Senate, Senate Bill 447, and it gives the 375 also, but it also takes money out of this fund for voting machines, and then it turns the balance into back to general revenue.
Wait a second. So you're telling me that it sounds to me like your bill was killed because it didn't go far enough. Sounds to me that the other bill, they want to give the $25 back to the people, but then you're telling me that they want the $110 million to go into general revenue?
Well, they want $8 million to go in for voting machines, and then the other go into the general revenue. Yes.
So they want to hang on. Okay.
It's just the opposite of what I wanted my bill to do.
Okay, so you're telling me can you? We're talking about State Representative Lanny Fight here. I want to understand this. You're telling me, tell us about this fund. What was this fund originally set up to do?
It was set up for property tax relief, and it was set up originally at $300, and it has a history of people dipping into this fund. In the first 4 years it was created, over $100 million was taken out and put in the general revenue. That was one reason I wrote my bill, was to do the interim study to stop things like that from happening.
It sounds to me
I feel like it should all go back to the people.
I completely agree with you. That seems to be what it's there for. If it's for property tax relief, that's what the fund's there for. That's what people are paying the tax for right now. And it sounds to me like people are wanting to raid that fund to spend the money on something else other than giving it back to the people. What do you say to that?
Of course, I oppose it. I will vote against that bill if it gets out of the Senate and comes to the other end. I will fight hard against it, to be honest with you.
Oh my goodness! Wow, this is to me. This is news. State Representative Lanny Fight. I didn't realize this. This is pretty frustrating because because your bill is very simple, and it actually is starting the path to maybe to give the people more tax relief, and they don't want it. They want the money now. So are you going to try to run your bill again? I mean, I'm assuming it already had made it out of the House, correct?
Yes, it made it out of the House. I think it was everybody voted for it except one who voted president, and it flew out of our Revenue and Tax Committee unanimously. And, everybody on the House end thinks it's a great bill. And, as I say, until it got to the city Revenue and Tax, there's where it failed in Revenue and Tax.
Who's running the competing bill that would raid the Property Tax Relief Trust Fund?
Senator Hendren is running it.
Ah, okay. All right. Interesting. Well, State Representative Lanny Fight, I commend you for having a good idea. And I think the House is right on in passing this to just let's keep the money there so we can give even more relief to the people. It seems to me like there appears to be some people think there's a need for that money to go into general revenue right now. I mean, obviously we need voting machines. I mean, that's something that a lot of people have said, but then the rest of the fund just gets drained. I mean, are they really talking about draining it to zero?
Well, they can't drain it to zero because you got to have a little bit of cushion because it pays out during the year, different times during the year. So it won't go down to zero. No.
Okay.
No. But again, it was taxed to the people and sold to the people as property tax relief. And it goes into the property tax relief fund, the money does. And I feel very strongly that it should go back to the people one way or the other, either reducing their taxes or reducing the sales tax that creates this fund.
Yeah, which would be awesome. I mean, to reduce the sales tax, because we're got a very high sales tax in the state. It kind of reminds me of those times when the feds, were accused of raiding the Social Security Trust Fund. That money sitting there, and then of course it's very tempting to try to use it for something else. State Representative Laney Fight, I appreciate your work. You've got a great idea and a great bill, and it's I feel like a very healthy mentality to try to give that money back to the people or eliminate the tax altogether that's funding the program. And best of luck to you, sir. I hope you run your bill again. Have you thought about trying to run it again?
We're talking about that right now.
Okay.
What action take. Yeah.
Well, I want to help you in any way I can to get the word out. I tell people to call their legislators. This is a simple bill, and it seems like a lot of times the simple bills are the ones that have the hardest time getting through. But we really appreciate you coming on the program, sir.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
All righty. State Representative Laney Fight, everybody. His bill, again, House Bill 1321, the Homestead Property Relief Tax Credit. See, this is why I love to interview just as many people as I can down here, because I had no idea. There's a lot of stuff's moving fast. I didn't know that bill failed yesterday. I was busy covering this other bill in the Senate, which I thought was interesting debate between Republicans and Democrats on when you have a jury. This was an interesting bill. State Representative Matt Pitch was presenting it in the full Senate floor. And it had to do with if you get a jury, meaning like the judicial system gets a pool of jurors and they're deciding who's going to be on the jury, who's not going to be on the jury. If they discover that one of the potential jurors is not a U.S. citizen, they would like the ability to take that information that this person is not a U.S. citizen and give it to the people that run elections, assumingly to make sure that they're not also registered to vote. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, if you're registered to vote, that is the basis for getting called for jury duty. Now, some other counties do it differently. They do voter registration and driver's license. Either way, you should also take the name down to the DMV, as far as I'm concerned. But you know what I'm saying? This was an interesting debate. It's pretty, again, a simple bill. But the Democrats on the Senate floor, they kind of had some problems with it. It did end up passing, but it needed 24 votes to pass, and it got, I think, 27 votes. So kudos to the Arkansas Senate. Kudos to the Arkansas Senate on passing it. Do we have that audio, Joe? I'm pretty sure I gave that to you as one of the cuts. Can we listen in a little bit? This is that bill. Again, to me, it's a simple bill. If you are found not to be a U.S. citizen and you were called for jury duty, they just want to be able to share that with the elections department, the voter registration department in a particular county or a particular city. Go ahead, Joe. Cue this up and let me see. Which one was it? Was it HB? I had it in front of me here. Just go ahead and hit play whenever
Judiciary
you're ready,
to the voter registration officials, and to amend Amendment 51 of the Arkansas Constitution.
And do we not have it?
Senator Pitch.
Thank you, Governor. This bill
Hang on a second.
worked
It was from
like
the
we wanted
Senate
to work.
floor.
A county employee went to the House sponsor and said, we have people removed from jury duty because they are not U.S. citizens, and we would like to hand that to the voter registration department just down the hallway. And the House sponsor said, let me check into that, wrote the bill that is in front of you. It was done without opposition. We think we have a good bill here.
I would remind senators that this will require 24 votes. I see we have a question. Senator Chesterfield. Senator Chesterfield is recognized for a question.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator, for taking my question. I'm on line 9 on page 2. It is the duty of any person whose registration has been canceled under the subsection of this section to provide the permanent registrar with proof from the appropriate federal, state, or local agency that he or she is a citizen of the United States, and upon complying with this, then that person can have his citizenship restored. Is that sort of like being guilty until proven innocent?
No, what that applies to is that if you were ineligibly a juror, they determined you were not a U.S. citizen, that is the process for getting citizenship to go back to where you can.
So this is the road forward?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Elliott is recognized for a question.
Understanding what the bill is doing regarding the jury pool, and maybe some of the lawyers can help. I thought jury pools now were coming from some source other than voter registration.
I can't really reference that. That's downstream to the judiciary. This bill just deals with if judiciary finds someone not a U.S. citizen, do they have the ability to relay it to other departments?
I remember, yeah, because I know it was now if you have a driver's license, it's coming from that source, I think now, rather than they're pulling from that because so many people did not register to vote because for that reason that it's now been changed. Okay. Maybe Mr. Bond or somebody else might know, people who called. See, Mr. Bond, you were reading and not listening to what I was saying. Okay, but that's my question.
Please address the chair. Senator Bond, do you wish to speak on this issue? I see you, Senator Flowers. I'm going to recognize you right after I recognize Senator Bond.
My left ear was broken there for a minute. I did not hear the question. So.
I was asking about the pool from which we draw juries these days. Is it from voter registration or is it from driver's license procurement? I was thinking it was different from voter registration. That was the question. Do we know, or you just get them?
Well, I think counties still have some leeway, and somebody with more experience than me, Teague, may have. Some counties do draw from license registration, whether you have a driver's license, and others have just registered voters still. I think the counties have some leeway in how to do that. Somebody can correct me.
Senator Flowers is recognized.
I was just trying to find the context that this bill is centered in, and I guess, okay, somebody's summoned for jury duty and the court finds that they're not a citizen. It said of the United States?
Yep.
Is that because the person is not a citizen of the United States? And then if that's the case, if the court finds that and disqualifies that person, then the clerk is supposed to notify a permanent registrar of the county of the residence of the individual?
That is correct.
And then after that notice, after receiving the notice from the circuit clerk, permanent registrar shall promptly cancel the dismissed juror's voter registration. The permanent registrar, that being the clerk, the county clerk?
That would be the registrar of the state of that county. Line 2 and 3, the circuit clerk shall promptly notify the permanent register of the county of residence. So that would be the permanent registrar of the county for that person.
So who is that generally? The county clerk that keeps the voter records?
There is a registrar that's over the elections in each department.
And then later in the bill on page 2, line 13, now this is after their
all right. We got to go to break. Stop. I just wanted to give you a little Senator Flowers there. Kudos to her for attempting to read the bill and understand it. But when I was in the chamber there, it was kind of painful to watch. Now they voted no on this, right? I know. I think most of the Democrats voted no. I know Senator Malik voted yes. It's a very simple thing. We don't want illegals to vote. And that's part of what this bill's doing. It's saying if you get called for jury duty and you show up and they find out that you're not a U.S. citizen Well, then we're going to take that information and we're going to give it to the county clerk so that they can make sure that you're not registered to vote and going to be voting in election, so we can clean up the voting rolls. It's actually a really it's a really specific thing to do that I think could really help in a lot of ways. We have to have the integrity of our elections, because if we don't have that, what do we have? It's kind of like not having borders. You don't have a country. We're going to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News. Find out more at conduitnews.com, and back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Was made a part of our Constitution. Very wisely, I would say.
Interesting. Well, go ahead. Well,
so the second point that I wanted to make with regard to amending the Constitution to allow the legislature, as you've said, to have the debate, because that's what I've heard some of the legislators say is, well, this will just allow the legislature to have the debate about setting caps, and we can set those caps at whatever we want. And my response to that, Paul, would be, the only true roadmap that we have here is history. And if we look back at what they did, and I was here in the legislature last session when they tried to do this, they tried to limit non-economic damages to $250,000. And I'll tell you, if it would not have been for pro-life Republicans in the House,
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, we got about a little over a minute. Real quick, we were talking with State Representative Julie Mayberry earlier about her plan that would not raise taxes to fund roads. She brought up Jonathan Barnett, the former state representative. We then played for you a flashback clip of State Representative Jonathan Barnett, then State Representative Jonathan Barnett, talking about the half-cent sales tax increase that was put to the voters in 2012, saying that it would be temporary. That's how it was sold to us, and now today's legislature wants to make it permanent. He's quoted in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette Let's see here. Former Jonathan Barnett said he opposes making the tax permanent. So now he opposes making the tax permanent. Former state representative. Quote, that wasn't the original commitment. I promised the citizens of Arkansas it would have a sunset on it. It would be 10-year sales tax and it would come off. So he says he opposes making it permanent because it's not the agreement. And again, it fuels the skepticism that the people have against government. Folks, we'll see you tomorrow. Be safe, Arkansas.